All right, hey everyone. Welcome to this episode of Thundercast. Today we have Jeff Lauro with Rainmaker. That's his company, and he's going to bring the thunder for us tonight. He's going to teach us a little bit about sales and a little bit about coaching and a little bit about I don't know, probably solar because he does solar too. So Jeff, why don't you jump in? Just tell everyone what you do. Give us the 10,000 foot view of your companies, and then we'll get into the meat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really, I help coaches and entrepreneurs like scale their businesses by really building like a trust-based, ecosystem. So many times in business, people don't realize that it's really about relationship, and many times I'll kind of put numbers before people. And so really I help coaches realize that, the whole goal of coaching is to help elevate people to that next level. And that, yeah, numbers are important, of course, but really to build trust, to bring value. And I always found that value first will deliver numbers. So that's what I do, man. I help a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of coaches really grow and scale businesses.
All right, great, great. Well, the first question I have for you is, what made you decide to be an entrepreneur?
Oh man, I'll tell you, it's might be a little silly, but my mom and dad, I'm from Northern California, and they were hippies, right? So I wouldn't say we were pretty comfortable numbers wise, money wise, but whenever I wanted to do something, if it didn't really kind of fit their mindset, it was like, well, you go raise half the money. So literally at 7, 8 years old, I'm out mowing lawns and washing cars and doing those kind of things in my neighborhood, going door to door and asking neighbors if they needed their lawn mowed, and I kind of liked the idea of making a little bit of money. It made me very industrious. And by the time I was 16, met really the pastor of my church who ultimately was pretty entrepreneurial himself. And it kind of got me starting to think about a little bit more in life. My mom and dad, awesome hard workers. They always work for someone else. And I started realizing, man, it's kind of work for yourself thing's kind of cool. And I started reading a bit more about it and ultimately got involved with listening to Nightingale Conant and those type of things. So I was really young and realized I wanted to get involved. But the key turning point for me was at 16 years old. I was dating, eventually became my wife, and her brother was at San Jose State University. He went to a real estate seminar and bought a box of books and cassettes. I came home. He said, Jeff, if you're interested, read it. I read all about real estate, fell in love, and I knew at that point I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So, been really a real estate entrepreneur most of my life, and that's turned into owning some other businesses and things kind of naturally, just as you kind of learn business in general. So.
Right, that's kind of a crazy story that your childhood, your parents were, hippies, but they encourage you to be an entrepreneur. I
Yeah,
remember.
well, I wouldn't know if they would say encouraged me, but they definitely wanted me to pull my weight in a good way, kind of that idea of like we all pitch in, we all do the work. So I look back and I realized now, of course, at the time I didn't like it. I realized how important that was, though, really developing kind of that resourcefulness and that like work ethic and that idea of saying, hey, I need to be independent here. If I want to do this, I'm gonna have to go get it. So I don't know if they're ultimately was trying to train me in that or it just happened to be, but it's a blessing nonetheless. And like I said, they're great parents. We lived well. Don't get me wrong. Northern California, Silicon Valley. But I was always, really working as a young kid doing something. And so that's really how it started, man. And it's hard to look back now and realize, man, what would happen if I would have basically been spoiled like I've spoiled my kids. And I'm really glad I had to kind of work hard for it, man. I think it made a huge difference in my life.
Right. What was the hardest thing about becoming an entrepreneur? Like, what was your biggest failure? Like when you really started, not when you were mowing lawns, but
Yeah.
you incorporated, you had to
Oh,
make
yeah, yeah.
payroll. What was the biggest failure you had to overcome?
Hands down, man, 2008 when the real estate crash, it took me down big time. Was At the time we had done about $250 million in sales. I had about 700 houses that I had basically had sold and in process of building in from 2004. And basically the real estate, market really crashed. And it wasn't as much real estate crash, if you remember it. It was really the cash flow was the crash, the
Banking
ease of
crash.
money. Yeah, it was the ease of money. People still wanted real estate. There's just no money out there. So I always said we didn't really have a real estate crash. We had an economic, financing crash, which completely changed everything. So I lost quite a bit of money back then. Just really having to renegotiate with banks, giving some properties back, going through what a lot of people went through. And then from there, that really kind of changed the dynamic because I still love real estate, still do real estate. But at that point, I realized I probably needed to do kind of diversify a bit. So that was probably the biggest failure I would say when it comes to business, man, is that oh 08, oh 07, oh 08 kind of crash.
Whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, there's always a theme, right? Everyone has a crisis, and there's always crises in our businesses, right? And it turns out that It's our ability to overcome the crises that allow us to survive, right? How did you overcome that crisis? Like what was your internal thought process? Like how did you get through that slog?
Yeah, well, it really was out of a bit of desperation. I mean, I wish I could tell you that, I had this great, incredible mindset and I was able to have all this internal strength and stuff. The reality was, I had children I had to feed at the time. My wife and I had a really rough time. We wound up, divorcing at that time. And it was a matter of me raising a couple kids on my own. And it was just really out of necessity. And I feel like, again, you look back and obviously I would have done a lot of things different. Maybe she would have as well. But when you start thinking about the fact I just really need to take care of my children, so I didn't have much of a choice to kind of sulk or kind of whine about it, although I was really upset in general, at the world, shall we say. But bottom line is, man, I just had realized I had to get to work, had to take care of my kids. And, there were still some pieces that were still really solid. I had just over leveraged quite a bit and I kept reinvesting all of my money into bigger and bigger projects. So as I was doing that, I just was really, cash poor, but real estate rich. So like I said, I had to renegotiate everything and giving some stuff back and kind of redoing things. And I would ultimately say it just was required, man. I had to take care of my kids. I had to kind of stay on the ball. And it took me a couple of years for sure to get back on. I mean, it wasn't something where, within a couple of months it was fixed. I mean, it was a big crisis. It took me a good year and a half before I actually started buying properties again. And all I did really, Doug, was I went out and I started buying properties that banks had taken over at these discounted prices and just really kind of got back into the game. I just got to do it, in a little bit different position, found some investors, we had some cash to work with and that, from that, it really helped tremendously.
Yeah, I find that when people have these crises, that the a lot of times the blinders come on and they really can't see much farther in front of them but one or two steps. And it's just keep on keeping on because it eventually gets better, right? It sucks.
Absolutely.
It's really painful. It's humiliating
Very.
because no one likes to fail. And if you can just overcome that and keep pushing, it helps to have something to push for, like children or
Yeah,
eating, right?
absolutely.
uh,
Yep.
right, but that's really what it is. It's like don't give up, keep pushing on. I mean, especially if you have nothing else. If you already have another income stream, why go through the pain? But if you have your whole life invested in something, right, and you don't want to give it up, I find that it's just a matter of sticking it out, waiting for the storm to pass. And it's easier said than done. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
I've been through something similar. It's excruciatingly painful, but I think that that's what makes true entrepreneurs. It's not success built on success always. It's always success built on previous failure because we just learn so much, and when it hurts, then you're really going to remember the lesson.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's what's made me a better entrepreneur today, right? I mean, if everything would have went smooth and we would have kept, moving and going on, the goal was really to try to get to the point where we were doing, a quarter million, $300 million a year, like, and that's in gross revenue on real estate, which obviously 2, 3, 400,000 houses. So I don't want to sound bigger than it was. I mean, we did a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, had some big projects, owned a golf course, some apartment buildings, some condos and some different things like that. So it was a big deal. But if I wouldn't have had that struggle, it wouldn't have prepared me for really, the last few years of like building a solid foundation. And I learned so much from it. I mean, I really learned about, over leveraging. And I actually had the blinders on during the time. I just thought this is never going to end. This is going so well. So I learned that blinders are great, but every once in a while you got to kind of peek a little bit and kind of look and see, okay, what's kind of ahead? What are some of those, potential things that can kind of disrupt it? So it just made me a better entrepreneur. Like you said, never easy to go through, man. It was a challenge, but I think, again, it makes you stronger and makes you better if you take the time to learn. I do a lot of coaching for my kids. We've done soccer and football and different things, and we always say we never lose, right? We either win or we learn. And teaching that is something I got a chance to experience, from in 08, 09, and 10, just going through that process. So
Wow. So, all right. So let's switch gears here for a second. So
yeah.
tell the crowd about Rainmaker, right? Tell us about some of the opportunities that you're doing right now that you're working on and the business that you're creating.
Absolutely. So, what I realized, but there's a lot of great information out there in, the last few years with the COVID changes, and it's been dynamic change from a lot of people moving, outside of the workforce, and really a lot of them realizing that they don't want to be dependent on big companies. I know a lot of people that I knew and friends that they were working for good companies. They had actually had really good careers, and they were pretty high up. They weren't necessarily laid off. They were just put in a position where they really couldn't go back to work. They were asked kind of to reposition as those companies did. They were having to take pay cuts and things like that. And I think a lot of them realized that they could potentially transition into teaching other people and coaching and doing that type of thing. So being in real estate, really, when I was a young man, you know, kind of part of the history way back is I started teaching how to get rich in real estate back when I was like literally 19 years old. I was mentored by a millionaire in real estate. And so I've always done educational and training, but on the real estate side. And then as I started having these other businesses, I realized that there's so many times these entrepreneurs and coaches need the help. And the hardest part is being a solopreneur. I mean, it's very challenging. So it's hard if you don't have the ability to hire the right people. You don't know who to hire first. So I just saw an opportunity to just take my knowledge. And what Rainmaker is really about is it's kind of my legacy project, which is very simple. I want to help 1,000 people become millionaires. And in doing that, I found that entrepreneurs and coaches are a great target because they usually have a great work ethic. They have the right mindset. And so having that opportunity to work with them, and that's what I've been helping. I have coaches that are pretty much mostly business type coaches and or service industry because of some solar background, roofing background, construction background, things like that.
Wow. So you do so much. It's a lot. So I guess, why don't you, it's hard to phrase this next question because you have so many businesses, so much experience. Your resume is huge. But
Yeah.
what would you say was your greatest success?
Well, on the business side, I would say coming out of 07, 08 and just really embracing that as that learning, opportunity, and then transitioning and getting back into real estate very, very quickly. That first couple of years, I mean, it was very scary. I mean, the market was scary, and I mean, those that lived through it, I mean, it'll be something we'll talk about when we're old guys sitting on, rocking chairs, right? We're
Right.
gonna look back and be like, oh, remember '08, and so I really think my biggest success was right out of that failure coming and getting right back on to the game, like getting in the game and like getting involved with buying some more real estate. We wound up buying some developments, land developments. So bought a couple thousand pieces of raw land, kind of high end land from a company went bankrupt. And I think just getting back involved was probably my biggest victory because it was scary. I had a lot of fear. There's a lot of things, really wanting to hold me back, and a lot of internal things like, man, I just had this big failure. Am I sure I should do this? Can I do this? And what happens if it does again? So I really look at that as probably my biggest success because, not necessarily the financial side, but the mental side that turned into some financial opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about the landscape right now when it comes to real estate? I just read just today that there are people in Wall Street that are expecting the Fed to drop the interest rate, right? Which is only going to crazy inflation, which is going to get really out of control. I mean, so what's your feel on it? Because the market does not seem to be cooling down, and there's a lot of people just on the sidelines waiting for it to cool down.
Yeah, I think, I think now when you look at the real estate, you have these huge multi-billion dollar, consortiums that are pooling money together and they're buying huge amounts of real estate in portfolios. And so you're seeing this, upper end where they're coming in and certain companies are buying, 1,000 houses at a time, from banks and so forth. So, and they're just really buying them and holding them. So I don't really see the market as necessarily slowing down or speeding up. I look at it more as when you have sound real estate, investment principles, which is I buy property, it creates a positive cash flow. And, whether the market goes up or goes down, it's a good long-term investment. When you approach it from that standpoint, even if it goes down 10, 15, 20% because of the market fluctuations, over time it's going to be worth more. And if we just look at, 60, 1970, 80s, 90s, you go through it all, today it costs more to live in a house than it did back then because naturally real estate is somewhat of an inflation proof type of a business. There's little pockets, but overall it's always going to look good because people need a place to live. They need clean, affordable housing. The number one thing, though, I tell everybody is I think it's going to become far more regionalized. And I say that, I'm in Florida, and I know you're here part time as well. And the reality is we have more people moving into Florida every day than I think most other states. I mean, I think we're in the top 2 or 3 growth states.
Yeah.
So even though we might see some struggles in the certain parts of like the Northeast, it's not going to affect Florida because we have too many people moving in. So I think it's going to be pocketed, regionalized. Yeah, when the rate Fed either increases or decreases, you have some fluctuations. But long term, I love real estate. I think it's still a great hard asset to own, and when it's bought properly, it's a great investment, to consider in the portfolio. Every millionaire I know and every billionaire out there has a portfolio of real estate. So I think the landscape would be cautiously optimistic, but very optimistic long term. People are always going to need a place to live. So great
Right.
question.
What would you say to a new entrepreneur, whether they're 18 or 60? If someone said, just, I think I'm going to strike out on my own and see if I can set up my own business for money, what industry would you recommend? Probably real estate, but what industry would you recommend, and what advice would you
Yeah,
give them for starting out? Because I think there's a lot of people out there, more and more people are just like, I want to work for myself. I want to have my own hours.
absolutely. So I think this is where there's a huge opportunity that a lot of people are afraid to do, and that's basically what I call blue collar millionaires. There's so much opportunity in HVAC, ironwork, solar, roofing, and a lot of the trades, and not just as being the skill set. But a lot of people are moving away from that. A lot of people are going into the digital landscape, and that's great. And we need that, and we are a tech-based world. But and I just had it 3 weeks ago. My air conditioner in my house goes out, right? I ultimately had to replace the supply line, do some different things. I paid somebody to do it. But the idea is that the owner of that company doesn't necessarily have to be climbing through attics and doing all the work, but somebody who is business minded, they're entrepreneurial, if they have a skill set like that, there's a huge opportunity because a lot of people are moving out of that. So I love the idea of it's a headache, it's a hassle, it's a lot of work. But I would say if you're in your early 20s, learning the potential of a trade, getting that skill set. And I know tons of people that started off doing that and turning into millionaires pretty quick. They roll that money a lot of times into real estate, into other investments. But I would say that if you're really young, it's a little bit tougher when you're in your 30s and your 40s, potentially, and you're kind of restarting because, it's a little bit harder to go back into that type of a trade type of thing. But that would be one of the areas I'd go into. I've got a son right now; he's in senior year in high school, and those are literally a discussion we were having yesterday out by the pool. We're just speaking about what he might want to do. But that's an area I would consider construction, new housing, things like that. Otherwise, if you're a little bit on the older side, I would say that you have to take this digital thing pretty serious, and especially if you have some good life experience, there's always somebody who you can teach, you can train, you can help. So I still love the idea of helping people, coaching wise, helping people be better, delivering a lot of good value. So absolutely, man. But yeah, I love blue collar. It's great.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that those industries are hurting for people. I think even if you don't want to start a business, it's a great place to go to make good money because they'll train you. You won't have to pay for schooling. They'll pay you while they train you, and it's just wow. It's like wow. I don't understand why more people aren't doing it, right? Because especially HVAC pays
Yeah.
really well.
It does, man, and again, part of it's regional too. I mean, here in Florida, I mean, you can't really live here without having AC. Every few years we have some kind of a storm or something that requires some roofing or some damage things. So there's just so many opportunities there. And to answer that question, like why a lot of people don't get into it is because it does take work. And I think that a lot of people, unfortunately, are watching some of the influencers out there and the Kardashians and these people, and they're making a ton of money and good for them. I mean, they're leveraging their skill sets and they see that that might be an easier route. And I don't know that they recognize that it's actually not as challenging as you think to just roll up your sleeves sometimes, get to work and do some things. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't wouldn't want to spend 40 years of my life, digging ditches and being a landscape architect and diving in there. But owning a landscape, design company, I mean, some of these houses, I mean, I'm seeing tickets, quality jobs are 10, 15, $20,000. My secret that a lot of people don't realize is pool building here in Florida is crazy. I mean, these guys are charging 60, 70, $80,000. The hard cost of that is it's like 30, 40%. There's a ton of opportunity margin there. And if you do a great job, do great customer service, you could probably become a millionaire in a couple years in the pool building industry. Now, again, take some schooling, take some skill set, but at the end of the day, if you're young and you're willing to put a couple years in to learn the trade, learn it right, and then learn some business skills as well, it's a great path to really get into and make some good money. But I think it's the work ethic, man. I think we live in a world where everybody wants to do the easy path.
I agree. I think there's some of that. I think too that there's also the fear of the unknown because the vast majority of people, and I have to say like 99.9%, if you've never been in business, you don't know how to start one. Like, what do I do? How do I incorporate? What taxes do I have to pay? What regulations do I have to obey? And so
Absolutely.
it's kind of like a trial and error, right? What insurance do I have to have? And I always just tell them, I said, look, just someone will tell you along the way. The government's going to want their money. And so eventually they're going to say, hey, by the way, you're supposed to do this. And someone's going to tell you, oh, by the way, you're supposed to have workman's comp insurance, right?
Right.
And some of it is self-evident, but some of it's not. And so it's this fear of the unknown to get started. And then the startup costs are always crazy, or at least people think that they need a lot of money. And that's not always true. I mean, it's in some industries, but it's not always true. And sometimes you just got to go out there and just like, look, you can work under your own social security number, right? As a sole prop. So just go out and start doing something. And once you get big enough to incorporate, and then you're protected financially. So there's just these little things that I think people, if they just had a little bit of understanding, go, oh, wait a second, incorporate, sole prop, mow lawns. All right, great. Right.
Right.
And then
Absolutely.
you grow it. The second you hire someone, you're going to learn almost everything you know to run a business the moment you hire someone, because your accountant's going to go, hey, do you have this? Hey, you got to pay that. Right. And
Yep.
oh, by the way, get an accountant. Right.
Yep.
So start low. Don't put a ton of money in. That's usually the biggest mistake everyone makes, where people get hurt. And, we all learn our lessons. I know I did. But
Sure.
yeah, sometimes it's a lot easier than it looks.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the big challenge that a lot of people do is they think that when they see a successful business, that that's how they started. And it's like, no, it's not typically how it starts. I mean, you don't need to have, step 15 figured out and be, having 15 service trucks, or, having 15, if you're in I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and they'll maybe have like one salesperson, and they're watching these big entrepreneurs out there, these big coaching systems where they have like 10, 12, 15, closers, shall we say. And it's like, well, they didn't start there. They were probably on the phone themselves, and they were learning it, themselves. So don't look at the end result necessarily and say it needs to look like that before I start. I mean, just get after it, figure out, again, what path you want to take. But I think that's the big mistake people make. They get caught up in the things that don't necessarily drive revenue. They worry about, potentially logos, and they worry about that kind of stuff. And it's like, man, don't worry about all those things. Like, find a way to truly serve somebody and go and do it. And the one thing I would add is, I think this is not taught well enough in our current system. And I'm not going to even say in the US, I'm going to say worldwide, is that there's something extremely valuable about a mentor. Having somebody who's walked the path before you, and having that relationship of somebody who's done it already and helping you along the way, because you can take their lifetime of experience, and you can literally collapse the time frame to not make all the same mistakes they've made. That's why I love books, because I can take somebody who spent a lifetime to build information, and I can read it in 2 hours, and they've poured in years to make this book available to me, and I can buy it for 15, $20, and I can learn so much. So I love the idea of mentors growing, that kind of that growth mindset. But I would say that's what a lot of people need to do, is just find a really solid mentor. Find somebody who's done what you're wanting to do, and just literally shadow them. I know some people and I did one of my first gigs. I literally worked for free just to work for the mentor. It quickly transitioned to him paying me to work for him. So I literally got paid to learn in the real estate, education space. So
Right.
again, it's find a mentor, man. Find somebody who's done before, and take advantage of it, and ask people. You'd be surprised how many times people want to help just because they want to help. And so I would tell everybody, man, everybody should have a mentor, somebody that's kind of a little bit farther along than them. So
Yeah, that's all really good advice. Let's talk about people who are already established, right? So let's say someone's at a scale. Maybe they're at $500,000 a year. Maybe they're at $1 million a year, and they just want to get to that $5 million tier, right? What kind of advice do you have for those people? Like, maybe they're still working in their business too much, right?
yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So I think the key to that is finding a company that has a good track record, been doing it, and seeing where they're at to hit those numbers, right? And I think that's where people make the biggest mistake, is they're trying to do it all on their own, rather than saying it's already been modeled before us. I mean, if you really think about everybody out there, I mean, you take, Amazon and Bezos, right? Didn't invent the website. I mean, he wasn't even the first bookseller, right? He just found a way to do it better, do it faster, to be more efficient, and so forth. So everything that we would want to do in life is, for about 99.99% of the time, it's already been done. So I love, again, the idea of a mentor or model. And so if you're sitting at 500,000, your goal is to get to 5 million, what does a $5 million company in your industry look like? What type of automations and systems, and what do they have in place? And it doesn't mean you copy it exactly, because there's some maybe some efficiencies you can work on. But I would say start there, and Stephen Covey said it best, start with the end in mind and work backwards, right? So that would be the key. Find a company that's doing, $1 million, and jumping from 500,000 to a million, pretty straightforward. Once you hit a million, getting to 5 million, that's a little bit more challenging because you're probably gonna need more people. You're gonna have to have better systems. I know a lot of people I work with, we get them from about six figures, maybe 100 to 200,000. We'll get them to 500,000 or a million. And at that point, they really need additional help, and not even virtual help. They're going to need true, employees, or at least independent contractors committed to them. So that would be the key. Find a company that is out there already doing it, and figure out what they have and what they have in place, and then try to cut a little bit of fat and make it a little bit better, be really efficient, build systems and automation. So that would be the key.
What do you think that the biggest mistake is that established entrepreneurs make?
Well, I think that you just mentioned it really. It's the idea of working in their business rather than working on their business. And that is really a big challenge as far as growing, because if it's always dependent on me as the individual to make every decision, then I'm limited to my ability and my experience of business. So one of the best things to do is start giving and empowering your team to have them start making some of those decisions. Now, ultimately, there's some big decisions, whether you take on some big financing or you're buying buildings. I mean, you have to be involved in some of the stuff. But I would say that would be the most challenging thing that almost every entrepreneur deals with, which is, growing a great team. Pay them very well, by the way. You got to pay a great team to keep them. And then, again, to scale, I think it's really important to stop always working in the business and making you what I call the choke point. If you become the choke point, it's really hard to grow. So you got to find ways to build, again, the systems, automations, the right people, the right team, pay them well, and then the business can grow. But your company will probably only grow as much as you grow. And so I think that, again, it comes back to having somebody mentor, having somebody ahead of you, and growing yourself.
Yeah, that's a great segue. All the entrepreneurs that I've ever spoken with that made the leap from this smaller business to the 5 million and more had to go through a tremendous amount of personal growth, right? Whether it's being too controlling, right? Trying to work in their business, or not giving power or control over to other people, and not having processes, or just overspending, or not paying attention because now they're making a lot of money and they go off and they come back and everything's falling apart. And it always comes down to this personal growth stuff.
Agreed, 100%. I mean, again, I can only grow a company so far before I have to grow myself. And again, I always encourage everybody to have, really be a part of networking opportunities or part of communities where, you can learn. But, currently, I have mentors. I have people pay to be a part of what they're doing and for their counsel. And if nothing else, it's great just to get the feedback and getting some input that is outside, because so many times we think we're right on track, and then we're maybe blindsided with something we didn't know about. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. So why not have somebody available who's does know, be able to kind of help bring it in. I mean, that's why I look at, somebody again, and everyone, you love him or hate him, Elon Musk, I mean, he's truly pioneering some things that no one's done, like going to Mars, right? But when it comes to, for example, solar, his business, or it comes to batteries, I mean, he didn't invent the battery. All he's doing is perfecting the process, doing his first principles and doing that type of thing. So again, I think that's the key is that I would imagine he's constantly growing himself, and how you grow yourself is growing the people around you so that you can actually have that good counsel, because it's pretty easy when you have a group, or a number of people evaluating an issue than trying to figure it all out yourself. I mean, I would like to think I know it all, but I don't, man. There's a far more I don't know than what I know. So if I can be around smart people that can help me and are better at a job than me, man, bring them on, let them run with it.
Yeah, I know, that's amazing. I think that's right on. I saw a meme the other day that said build a team so strong that no one can tell who the leader is. And I
I
thought
love it.
that's just right on, right?
Love
I
it.
mean, because I think this macro or micro management is just destroying companies. I mean, it literally is. If you especially if you want to get out of your business so you can grow it and not work in it, you got to train someone to do what you do and have your clients respect them.
Absolutely, 100%. And and I think that's even coming out from the very beginning. And again, not trying to go back all the way to service industry, but that's one of the great things about, again, in the service industry, if you're like, own a HVAC or something like that, is you're eventually going to build and find the right people. You're going to pay them well. They're the ones that are in the field. They're the ones that represent your brand. And you can find an office manager. You can find those other positions that can kind of help manage it for you. So you're not the one making every decision. You're not the one picking up the phone. And it's done every single day. It's just a matter of building a business from the beginning, knowing, again, what is my end goal with this? So if somebody's going to start a business, again, I ask coaches, one of the first things I ask them is, I say, great, if I could give you the magic wand, you could create whatever you wanted to be, what would it be? And if they tell me, well, I want to, build a company that makes $100,000 not a year, but a month. Okay, great. And that's great. But what else? Right. And that's a great question to ask me. What else? What else? And what you'll find is that right there puts in motion all of, not all, but most of the steps you would need to do in order to build that type of a company. So that's a great meme though. I'd love to see it because that's awesome, man. That's a good one.
All right, so now I want to tap some of your true genius because you're, at least in my experience, an amazing sales guy.
Yeah,
So, give us some advice on sales. Like, maybe you get a couple of examples for different industries, but if you have any gems of wisdom on how people can increase their sales process, that would be
absolutely.
incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, go-to every time in sales is to make sure that you're giving people what I call the perfect result. What is it that is going to serve and help them the most? So, give you an example is, let's say like the weight loss industry, right? I mean, I love eating, man. Who doesn't love, some good Mexican food and some Italian food? Who doesn't want that, love that, right? The key is with that is, in order for that person to sell me into a program, what they have to do is I have to feel confident and I feel that I can trust them to give me the result that I'm looking for. And more importantly, not just the result, but most likely the accelerated result. So simply in weight loss is kind of a good example. I know that if I lose a pound a week and a year, it's 52 pounds. Well, that's great. But I don't want to wait 52 weeks to do it. I want to lose the 50 pounds in 3 months or whatever it is. So knowing what ultimately your perfect client wants, what's the result they're really going after, and building an entire system designed to serve them and to help them accomplish that goal. So the first thing is, giving them the perfect result, knowing what the result is, to knowing who your perfect client is. Life is too short to work with people that you can't, that you don't want to be around, right? So should from a perfect result, you move to a perfect client, and then you go through some different processes to make sure that you're delivering, really that trust throughout the whole process. So sales is really about giving people not necessarily what they always want, but what they need. But I don't want to say disguise, but coming across with the idea that of it is what they want. They just don't necessarily know what they want. So let me give you an example in solar. A lot of people, what they really want is a lower bill. They want some freedom. Here in Florida, it's a monopoly. So in solar specifically, the biggest thing that we did is we really get in to say, well, what do you have now? What your goal is? And then comparing where they're at, where they want to go. And one of the big things is there is how do we get them that accelerated result? And with sales, I feel like what I've always shared with everybody that is critical is you have to help people understand what is the cost to do nothing. So if somebody's trying to help me with weight loss, or if I'm trying to help somebody in solar, if I don't do anything, I'm going to stay the same. I'm not going to lose my goal. I'm not getting my goal weight. I'm not going to have that whatever I'm looking for, beach body, whatever it is. If I don't go solar, I'm always going to be tied to the electric company. I'm always going to be at the mercy of them raising their rates. I'm always going to be dealing with that. So my cost of inaction, the cost to do nothing, is typically what will motivate people and to get what they want. So they need to have a clear idea what they want. So depending on the industry, since I work with a lot of coaches, that would probably be the best example. Let's say, for example, I have a coach right now. He helps people get leads, and he's great at what he does. Gets leads from Facebook, $2, $3, $4 a piece. They're good quality leads. When he speaks to people, they might say stuff like, well, I want more clients, or I want more money. I want more of this. And it's like, okay, well, helping educate them in building trust with them to understand, like, what are all the, things that come before the ultimate goal of a revenue, and doing a lot of education. So I do what we call edu selling. And that is, the key. What's the result they're looking for? How can I help them get it faster, less expensive, more consistent? And, who's my perfect client? And when you start putting all that together, giving them the results, sales becomes fairly easy because you're literally just serving people. You're giving them what they want, but you're also really giving them what they need. So at the end, they're like, wow, I didn't even realize that's what I was looking for. So I know I rambled on for a lot there, and you
No,
might have
no,
a couple
no,
questions on it, but yeah,
it's a really tough question because it's really broad across industries, right?
yeah.
Um, you know, this is a question I think all business owners have because we'd like to maximize our profit by minimizing our hourly input every day. And I see people talking about this on ads on Facebook, and I know entrepreneurs that talk about it. Geez, I wish I could only work 4 hours a day. I wish I could only work 2 hours a day. What do you think the sweet spot is? I mean, especially if you're not working in your business anymore and you're listening and making decisions, right? And doing all the high level stuff and delegating. What do you think that sweet spot is, especially if you want to start having multiple streams of income in multiple businesses?
Well, I think it just depends on how strong your team is, right? So I know it's kind of a broad answer, it depends, but I think it comes back to, a couple key issues. I mean, if you're doing something that you really love to do, sometimes it doesn't really feel like work. So,
Right.
so if you're doing something that you love to do, and again, if it is built on the idea of serving people, and that's where it's coming from, I think the hours can kind of fluctuate, from the standpoint of because you might take on pieces of the pie or pieces of the responsibility that maybe are not necessarily always in the executive type role. I mean, for example, I think Russell Brunson is just recently done it, where he, started ClickFunnels with his team, and he was kind of running it. He's just stepped himself into a position where he's no longer really running the company because it became the business side. And he loved building funnels, right? So I think it really depends on the individual. What is it? What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? And also comes the life stage, and we start talking about multiple streams of income. I would always say until you're probably generating 10, 20, $30 million, you pretty much want to stay focused in that one industry for revenue. You don't want to diversify too much. You want to take the money that you bring in profits and invest that into some things, but even that should be turned over to the pros, unless, for example, if you love real estate or if you love stock trading or whatever else. So again, it's a question that is hard to answer because it depends. I would say you never really want to be in a position where you're not at least evaluating your business for an hour to 2 hours a day. If it's your primary business, then I would find the roles you enjoy, and I would turn over the ones that are your challenging roles and give them to people. So if you're not good with numbers, man, get a CFO or get a solid accountant or CPA, and then let them do some of those things and take yourself out of the stuff you don't like.
Right. So I've tried something similar where I try to work 4 hours,
Okay.
which means I have to squeeze my 8 hours work into 4 hours. And for a lot of it, I can't believe how much it was possible, like how much wasted time I have. And then so all of a sudden I have another 4 hours. And I would say that I'm not working because I'm thinking and I'm networking. And
Ah,
I
man.
may not be talking, I might not be troubleshooting, and I might not actually be talking about my business, but I'll be talking to other business owners and listening to them talk about theirs. And I'm building these relationships. And it never fails. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's a year. They'll come back and go, hey, I'm having this computer problem, right? And there's my opportunity. It's like sowing these seeds, right? So
Sure.
the more I'm out there talking to people about their business and listening to their problems, the more business I get over time. And
Absolutely.
so it's not fair to say that I'm like, woo, party, I'm out there drinking and eating and on speedboats and or fishing. But I try to squeeze as much as I can in the first 4 hours of my day. And of course, I get up early. I got up at 4:30 today.
Oh, wow.
So I get in, I get my workout, I come in and I'm putzing around on my computer. And I will tell you, I have 45 minutes of such high productivity because no one's calling me, no one's bothering me
Right.
just before all the storm begins every day. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I end up going to bed early. So I guess you're right. It's different for everybody. But I guess the question I was really asking is if we look at everyone's business, realistically, right? Objectively, how much are we actually working through the day? How much time are we wasting? And if we're going to waste that time,
Oh,
wouldn't you rather be doing something fun with your kids? So just squeeze it into the first 4 hours and delegate the rest.
yeah, no, I love that. So it's again, it is different for everybody. It depends on which stage they're in their business. But once you have a business that's generating consistent revenue, you've got the right people in place. Even though you might have that kind of deep work focus for 4 hours, as the owner of the business, you're never going to turn it off because the fact is you need to be what I call the chief promotion officer. You need to be out there promoting your business. And it might not look like you're in the office sitting in front of a computer. It could be, going to that, networking event. It could be you, going to a conference. It could be you, again, in your case, doing a podcast to deliver value to people that truly need it. Like, so that's to me still working on your business. It's just not necessarily working in the business because you have other people taking care of it. So I think as entrepreneurs, I know very few that ever really turn it off. I think it's really you're speaking about, and I completely agree, is if somebody would deep focus 4 hours of just absolute work in their business, it could free up a lot of hours during the day that we would traditionally waste and let you focus on other areas that do help the business, but maybe don't have that exact, ROI on the short term of, hey, I put an hour in, I just found a new client. It might be, hey, I just met 14 new entrepreneurs in this little mini group I went to that turns into 5, 6, 7 deals down the road. So I love the mindset. I love it. Deep focus is great. I block time is what I do. So I'll take blocks of time, 2 hours at a time, 1 hour time out. I'll do blocks, and I try to tune everything out when I'm in my deep work block. So great concept. Everybody needs to do that for sure. And working on your business is a lot more than just showing up to the office, looking in front of a computer, doing whatever you do. It's constantly growing yourself. I mean, I read every day for typically 45 minutes to an hour. I do another hour of some level of training. Usually at least once a day, I'm on a level of a call with some either mastermind I'm a part of or whatever else. So, there's a 2 to 3 hours every day that I'm growing myself, as we discussed earlier. And in growing myself, I'm really growing the business because as I push myself, now my business can become more. So great stuff.
Yeah, someone told me when I first started my business eons ago, that being an entrepreneur is a lifestyle. Like
Sure.
you're never not working, but you're never quite working all the time, right? Because you literally have, especially once you grow enough to where you have employees, you have the choice to hand it off, right? Or like I will get calls at night. They're very few and far between, but it's the nature of my business. I'll get emergency calls. So I'm never not working. Or I will meet someone new and they'll say, hey, well, I do this. And I'm like, well, I do this. And like, oh my God. And we'll just get in this great conversation. But that doesn't feel like work. So I
Right.
guess that 2 to 4 hours a day, it's like, all right, what's your strategy? How's your strategy coming? How's your sales doing? How's your pipeline? Are you making new contacts? Do you have any new leads? How have you called them? Right? Have you
Yep.
followed up? Have you done your presentation? How many sales did you get? Those are the types, that's the stuff. Right? That for me, that's work. Like I have to go and I have to think about that. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
focus. This is the struggle. This is where I struggle. I ace over here, but this is where I have to struggle. And this is where I have to stay committed. And then I get away from that and I do the stuff I love because it doesn't feel like work.
Absolutely. And that's a great mindset to have, which is, each part of your, big picture item of the business should have some dedicated time to it, right? I mean, depending on where you get in your stage, you might have 30 minutes every day that you work with the CFO or the bookkeeper, or whichever you might have on the money side of things, and it should be done potentially looked at every day when you're early on, right? Once you have an established business, it might be a meeting a week for 1 hour. So again, it depends on the stage of where you're at, but I love that mindset, which is I'm gonna again, like I said, I block time. This is my focus in that time, and as an entrepreneur, you're right. It is 100% of a lifestyle, period. It's part of what takes us over. Because you know what? If I'm not working on the business or this business or that business, I find myself writing. I find myself, recording videos, doing something that's ultimately helping the business and really, or really, I should say, kind of helping the brand. So, great stuff for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, wow. So we're just pushing right along here. All right. So give us the secret sauce. Let's get in. So I guess we'll start closing. Give us some secret sauce. Give us a piece of advice that all business owners could use that could help their business today.
Absolutely. So I think this is probably one of the most underrated skill sets that people recognize as a skill set. And I believe it's the number one thing in our entire life that isn't just about business, it's about life. And it's really the skill of making good decisions. Everything comes from decisions. And no matter where you are today, literally the culmination of every decision you made up to this point, good, bad, or indifferent. So I think if somebody says, well, what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is actually be and engage with this idea that my life is about the decisions I make. And so learning that skill set is massive. I mean, I think it's more important probably than anything else. And I do an interview question when I'm kind of hiring people like little bit to mid to higher level. Okay. I ask them, I give them 6 traits. I really give them 8 traits that they look at, but there's 6 that are kind of core, which is what's, and I have them rank them 1 through 8. Focus, attitude, beliefs, hard work, these qualities, decision making, focus, and goals. So then what happens is I ask them to rank them and explain what their choice is. And a lot of times I get, attitude, like, oh, you gotta have a positive attitude. That's the key to success, right? And it's true. You gotta have a great attitude. You need all 8 of these to be successful. But if you think about it, everything comes back to a decision. You can wake up in the morning, wrong side of the bed. I have a decision in that moment. Am I going to let whatever brought me to this moment feeling that I'm off either affect my day positively or negatively, right? Everything I believe is a decision, and I'm not talking about just the decision of, finances, or decision of, do I do Facebook or do I use Google marketing, like that kind of decision. Those are important too. But really everything, what you believe, what you focus on, what your goals are, those are all decisions. And so I tell everybody to take that a lot more serious. I don't think there's been a lot of work on the decision-making process. I actually have a book that's about 90% done. It really speaks about being an entrepreneur and learning to make great decisions, because it doesn't help you just in business. It's going to help you in life. And I would say that's, to me, the secret sauce is learn to make great decisions, because they have such a huge impact. And I love what you said a little while ago, like, maybe just networking with somebody, going to lunch with somebody, meeting them, talking about the business, that decision of being separated from the office, but being in the field might turn into $1 million deal down the road, or $100,000 contract. And so again, those are all decisions, being proactive about it, blocking time. It's a decision. Hard, deep work focus. That's a decision. So I think decisions is the key, man. If I'd love to argue anybody who would want to say different, but I think life comes down to decisions in a good way. You still need a positive attitude. You have to have great belief system. You have to have all those things, but it always is a decision. So that's my secret sauce, man.
All
Learn how
right.
to make good decisions.
I like it. Decisions. All right. Real quick, if people want to get a hold of you for business coaching and be part of Rainmaker, how do they get a hold of you? It'll show up in the bottom of the video as well, but you might as well
Yeah.
say it here. Give us an email address and a website.
Yeah, it's super easy, man. Just Jeff at rainmaker.com. All I've done is I've taken the word Rainmaker, Rainm, and instead of an A, I have an 8. Okay. And then on its side, it's an infinity symbol. So it's Rainmaker with an 8. Again, a lot of what I do is built on this idea of infinite income and becoming an infinite you, having infinite impact. So I would say you go to, rainmaker.com, replace the A with the 8, or Jeff at Rainmaker. For sure, reach out. And I do a ton of just free training and one-on-one. I do audit calls for businesses, absolutely free. I do so many different things just to provide value. I always believe that money follows value. And at the end of the day, I want to leave the world better than, I came into it. So I'll always want to be helpful. So it doesn't matter if you have a big business, small business, just want somebody to speak to about a little idea, whatever else, reach out. If I can help, I will. And if I can't help you, the great news, I have a great network of people, and I might be able to put you in the right direction of somebody who could truly help you. So yeah, reach out, man. It's fun. We have a community. We're just ready to launch, and we'll make sure that we give you we'll make sure that we get them inside of the website. Very, very obvious, like join our community. Inside the community, we'll talk about sales. We talk about growing businesses. We talk about scaling. We talk about ourselves. I mean, it's really cool. So yeah, check us out, man. Rainmaker.com.
Awesome. Well, everyone, if you want to get a hold of Jeff, definitely reach out. He's definitely got the secret sauce. He's got the juice. Thank you for being here today. If you're struggling in your business, hang in there. You got this.